two positions. One was this, the game fragment that Michael Tal played against Hans-Joachim Hecht. And the other one is the game fragment from the game between Arverbach and Kotov. So, well, so there was only one student who sent the answer, and it was John Wogan. So John suggested to play Queen C2 in this position. So John, my congratulations, you are right. This is a very good move, but you are not Michael Tal. Michael Tal played another very nice idea. So it's not as good as Queen C2, but it is really beautiful. He decided to sacrifice the queen with e takes f6. What did happen after that? So they have to take the queen, otherwise they are in a trouble after rook e1 coming. So they took f takes g7. Well, it's time. Well, we are threatening with this. So it's time to save this rook, rook g8, and bishop f5. Very nice idea. So if queen takes there, I'll show you. If queen takes f5, it's knight d6, gaining the material back. So it's absolutely winning position. All right, so queen takes, if queen c4, it's just one check and the game is over because the king cannot escape. So he can block with this, but then king here and we gain the queen simply. So it's again an absolutely winning position. So bishop f5 is a very nice idea. So this is where black realized that they should give up the queen because they just cannot move it. Once moving the queen away from the e file, it's always rook e1. If the queen goes somewhere on the e file, it's still rook e1. So that's why they took on h4. Bishop takes e6. Well, and well, if they take, it's a check, and so on. So look at how beautiful it is. Of course, finally it led only to approximately equal position. So here the engine says white is slightly better, approximately similar to queen c2 continuation that John suggested. So rook g7, then g2 is hanging, so g3. Well, it's not attacking the knight, but this move is forced to play. So, and you see, maybe the black player here considered that he is attacking too many pieces simultaneously and white cannot avoid material losses, but with bishop c4 it's possible to avoid them because the bishop is attacking the bishop and the rook is no longer hanging, and if bishop takes here and knight takes on c4, and so white saves his pieces. So this is what happened. The bishop is better than the knight, and the pawn structure for white is better than for black. However, black has one extra pawn, but all these pawns are isolated. So similar, I mean, just a3 and c4 stops it. However, I don't think that we need to play c4. We definitely need a3, but we'd better keep this square available for the bishop to attack the enemy pieces and pawns. Well, white finally won the game, but from this point, it's slightly better for white only. So I don't think we will continue working on this example. Just look again. So instead of just a queen c2 retreat, which is very logical, I agree. So yeah, safeguards the queen with multiple threats, bishop f5 and knight d6. Yeah, I agree. So for example, b takes c4, after which bishop f5 works really well, queen e5, and they lose the queen, for example. Well, after queen c2, they can capture on h4. We have to deliver a check and take this, and then it's slightly better for white only. Okay, so there is a question by Peter. In the position where black was +6, if black exchanged queen for rook, what would be the material? Okay, so where black is +6? Here. So queen for a rook, you mean which move? Queen e2? But it's not only an exchange for a rook. If you exchange for a rook, it's a checkmate, or well, almost a checkmate. You have to block, give up another knight, and go there. So there was no possibility to exchange the queen for a rook. Or which line are you talking about? You can unmute yourself and tell me.
Yeah, there or maybe a move or two later, but yeah.
So
But I
well,
think
this
you
is their
explained it. You explained
yeah.
it.
So the point is that they just cannot move their queen away from the e-file, and keeping and exchanging the queen for a rook means the other rook joins the game and the king is in the danger. So there was no possible to initiate this exchange actually. Okay, fine. Let's continue with the second part. Well, the game between, well, knight e2 was played. So this is the position that I sent. And, well, some of you can be familiar with this position. It is in my course on Chessable. The course is called, they call this, it's power up visualization. So this is the course where I go through this position. And well, again, here John was right, but didn't finish his line to the very end. Queen h3, king takes h3, rook h6, king g4, knight f6, king goes there. So here John says that knight g4, but if you play knight g4, you have to calculate some extra variations, and then you have to evaluate them. So for example, knight takes f4, how to play, because the king is about to escape after that. If, let's say, we continue with this, they play this move. So if you take, they escape. But you can play this move, and then rook f8 leads to a checkmate. So rook g8 doesn't work. Rook f8, wait a sec. Well, I'm saying that knight f4, rook g8, rook g8, knight h5, this. Okay, there was a possibility to save, to avoid a checkmate by doing a queen sacrifice. So now rook f8 doesn't work because of king g4, so you have to take this. And then king takes on g4, and you have bishop f4, and they lose on g2. So this is how you get a winning position, but you have to calculate it. So knight g4, knight f4. Well, doing rook f8, for example, wouldn't work this time. And then he escapes. So instead, in the game, it was knight d7 played. So if he escapes, it's a checkmate. Rook g8, rook f6. If so, that's why he wants to push the rook forward to let the king hide behind. Then rook f8 check, he goes back, and knight f6 again. So king f5. Well, this is where he played, well, it was very close to a 40 moves time control. That's why Black decided just to make a few moves, just to repeat the position and get closer to the 40 moves control, where extra time is added. But actually, he needed to take on d5. King g4, knight f6. Well, maybe even he didn't. So they repeated the position several times, and finally he took on g5. What now? Well, king g5 was played in the game, but what else can be played? Because now black is threatening to move the bishop back. Then maybe, okay, then knight goes back. And then knight g4, right. So if queen d6, rook d6, and in this position, bishop goes there, and this is a winning position. So white avoided a checkmate, but gave up a piece. If king takes, then it's a rook f7 with the idea of this very nice checkmate. So what can stop it? Bishop h4. Rook g6, king goes to h5, which is the only square. And so not knight f6, but rook f to g7, threatening with this checkmate. What they can do to stop it? This definitely doesn't work, because we can take, and then we can still move the knight to f6 and threaten with this. So knight g3, for example, rook g3, and we are still threatening to do something like that. So knight f6, yeah, this is what actually happened. King went to h4, and this. They finally played this move here, and now they have to sacrifice the queen because we are threatening with a mate as well as to take the queen. So this is how the game ended. But actually, I see that knight g4 is also a very good idea. So here, John was absolutely correct. And queen h3, of course, was a very attractive tactical strike, which was very nice. So let's talk about our topic today. Today we are going to start with the bishop's superiority. So okay, so Clifford already left our meeting. Okay, so we're expecting more people to join us soon. So what do you guys know about bishops? So yeah, Peter is absolutely correct. Bishops are better in open positions and knights are better in closed positions. However, most of the positions become more open once we come closer to the end game. That's why it's better to keep the bishop rather than the knight to the very end of the game, where you can take advantage of the bishop's power. Okay, what I can say about it. So, of course, the bishop is not the most valuable piece in chess. However, the bishop may play a decisive role in many different positions. So, what is the bishop's power? Well, first of all, you should understand that the bishop is a long-range piece, and the bishop can gain tempi. Also, the bishop can hold several pawns on the same diagonal. Also, very often we may sacrifice the bishop in order to ruin the enemy king's pawn cover. Well, in the endgame, the bishop is usually better than the knight when because the positions are typically more open. And the bishops are usually really good when it comes to an outside passed pawn. So especially bishop playing against a knight, and the player with the bishop has an outside passed pawn. So the knight has to be to tie his knight to that pawn or the king maybe, and you can do something else on the other side of the board. However, if it's the end game where there are no pawns on one side and there are only pawns on the king side, for example, the knight can be better than a bishop. Also, an outpost. I mean, the bishop standing in the center and defended by the pawn very often can be stronger than even a rook. Also, you know about the the fianchetto, which means that the bishop is developed to g2 or b2, which means that such a bishop can attack from a distance. And this g2 bishop is very dangerous. That's why nowadays people with d4 prefer to play London, but Catalan is actually more promising. So with this bishop on g2, they can initiate a long-term pressure on b7. So what else the bishop can do? Well, also I didn't say that the bishop being fianchetted covers the king. Uh, so the bishop can participate in some tactics, create pins, make forks, discover it, and X-ray attacks. Let's now talk about the bishop pair. So the bishop pair can control almost the whole board because, one bishop only can cover the squares of a certain square, but two bishops can cover all the squares. And in order to achieve a bishop pair, it's quite common to sacrifice the exchange. So bishop pair represents a real power. Okay, so actually, well, Bobby Fischer was really good with bishops. Today we have his game, and we're gonna start first with this. What else I wanted to tell you? Okay, Peter asks, what's the numerical system to use bishops for knights?
Actually, what is your for all the pieces? What do you
All the pieces,
generally?
right?
What do you use?
So,
Like,
okay, let
because I
me
say
go.
a
Mhm.
pawn's one, a knight's a three, bishop's 3.25, rook's five, queen's nine. But there's all kinds of different systems.
Yeah, so I sent an email on Friday where Alpha Zero did the same thing, where Alpha Zero explained how the value of which pieces. So please look at this. I don't know if it's too small or I think you can understand it. So the knight is 3 and 0 5, where whether the bishop is 3 and 1/3. Rook is 563, but this is where I doubt, because in my opinion, it can be from 5 to 5 and 6. It depends on the position of the rooks, because if it's mainly endgames where the rough files open, yes, it's 5 and 6. Where if it's a middle game where the rooks do not participate, it's 5. So that's why I'm happy to, in such positions, I'm happy to exchange, to sacrifice the exchange and get a compensation of 2 pawns. So I have a bishop, 2 pawns for the rook. And the queen is 9 and 5, which is true. I would even say sometimes 10, sometimes even 14, depends on the enemy king's position. So I think these ones which are marked here with classical, which means standard chess, so are very similar to my understanding.
And just one more quick question. Um, a lot of systems give a bonus for two bishops versus a knight and a bit. They say plus 0.5 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. So I would say that a bishop pair can compensate a pawn loss. So if you have a bishop pair, then don't be afraid to be a pawn down. Very often you can either exchange your bishop for the knight, ending with the endgame with the bishops of opposite color, which is likely to be a draw, or you, for example, exchange the bishop for the knight, which was protecting a certain pawn, which you can capture then. So, and this is how you can equalize. So, well, I have such a game example where I was already pawn up, and I had 2 pawns. My opponent had 1 pawn. I had 2 bishops. He had a bishop and the knight, but my bishops were able to create another tactical strike, and I could win a pawn. Okay, so guys, by the way, those of you who are at the webinar, please let me know if you did receive the email on Friday with this table. If anybody received it. No, okay. Well, you can type in the chat, and only the answers when I ask you about the concrete position can be sent like direct messages to not let other people to see the answer and consider this option rather than what they originally had in mind. Okay, fine. Let's start. So what do you think about this position? Let me make a first move. Rook e5. Rook e5 was played, so black to move. What do you think about this position? Who is better and why? Bobby Fischer was playing against Mark Taimanov. So, okay. So I agree. By the first glance, it seems that white is better. But how much white is better? And is this enough to play for a win? Well, yeah, the bishop is definitely better than the knight, which is a bit abstracted. However, the position is simple enough to say that if black plays properly, the game is likely to end in a draw. So there is not enough attacking resource for white to win the game. So what did happen? Well, yeah, you notice that these two pawns are hanging, and probably it makes sense to play b6. Mark Taimanov did play this move, but actually that only reinforced our bishop. Instead, if only he played king d6, then let's say bishop b7, rook b8, bishop a6, there is a pawn behind hanging. Well, now these two are hanging, so probably bishop a2, but then this fork. However, the rook goes to a7 to protect it. The position is equal. So this king d6 move allowed black to hold the position. According to the engine here, it's plus 0.1, which means that there is no practical chance. Well, there is practical chance, but it's most likely the game ends in a draw. So, but they played b6. That improved the bishop as well as made another weakness, which white started attacking. Now to not, well, if b5, it's rook c5 simply. That's why a5. But locating the pawns on the dark squares. Okay. So can you please stop drawing? Thank you. So, but locating the bishop, locating the pawns on dark squares means that the bishop can operate through the light squares. Why not bishop b7? Okay, so, well, bishop b7 is playable too, but then the bishop may become the object of the attack. However, you always have this rook e7 move. So bishop e7 was playable too. But the good point is that from f1, the bishop actually goes to c4. If you play bishop b7 and then go to d5, the knight captures you. But with this move, you tie the rook down to the f7 pawn because there is no better way to protect it. Now, let's improve the king. The rook has to move, knight b8, so they probably want to do something like that. So rook d3 check, king goes there, and c3 to stop the enemy knight activity. Knight c6 anyway, rook goes here, so if the knight moves somewhere, it's rook e7. But king goes back. Of course, white doesn't want to repeat the position. So a4. a4 fixes these pawns on dark squares. And also forces black to make a move, because which move do they play? If they play with the f pawn, it's rook e6. Well, they probably have to play something like that, but we will see something similar happened in the game. Well, they move the knight right away, because what else they can do? h3 with the idea of g4, which takes this square away from the knight. Well, no, well, as for going back for bishop b7 and bishop c4, well, bishop c4 is definitely better because now the rook is tied down to this pawn. And once they move it, it's always rook e6 and the rook invades the enemy camp. Yes, it's possible to play f6, but once f6 is played, the rook enters. So let's say here you play f6. Let me play this. So where does the king go? To d7 or to where? To d7, for example. Okay, then I'll try to invade the enemy camp with my king. Maybe through e4 was better, actually. Well, bishop b5 cannot be played, so the rook is hanging. But we can do this move and then play bishop. Ah, no, then it's g6. No, we cannot. So I think this is a plan just because the knight is already pinned. So maybe you may say the king should go there, but then bishop b5, the knight has to move and we win in pool, don't we? So that's why f6 doesn't work. The rook on e6 becomes more active. So knight e7, h3, knight c6 back. So I don't see the point of doing this move because then this. So yeah, like this, then g6 probably, but g4, the knight still has to go back. So knight c6, h4, h5. Check. Okay, so for those who would like to record, actually there will be a recording, and tomorrow on Monday, I'm going to send you the email with recording as well as with the homework. And there also will be some summary about the webinar. So please wait for tomorrow. I don't think that you need to record it. So king c7, rook attacks the pawn. And how to play in this position? So Taimanov played a f5 move, weakening this square, but g6 is his alternative, because if he plays something like that, it is a blunder. Now this is hanging twice. So g6, let's talk about g6. What would you do in this position? There is no tactical strike to initiate right away, but which strategical moves would you play here to obtain some advantage? So g4 to break the pawn chain. Okay, interesting. What else? F5 right away, but what's the goal? Because you exchange, or maybe you don't want to exchange. If you exchange, his rook becomes more active, and g6 is still a weakness, but he now can defend it with rook f6. So, any suggestions? Oh, actually. Okay, I found a life hack. I put your meeting chat to the same monitor from which we are doing the analysis. So bishop b5, I agree. So that blocks the rook swap because of this, true. So let's say they just play any rook move, rook d2, rook e8, and you can initiate a rook swap. If they avoid it, then f5 and the king enters the enemy camp. So it was important to hold the e5 square. Well, okay, so there was another suggestion. Maybe with rook g5, you could win 3 pawns for the bishop. But no, 3 pawns doesn't... the bishop is better than 3 pawns. It's not enough. Especially such a bishop when there are so many open positions. So the idea of f5, but you should play it at the very best moment. And you shouldn't take, because if you play f5 right away, what can you do? It's always knight e7 and knight takes f5. So that's why prepare this first. So, okay, rook g5 first. Okay, let's say g6 was played, then rook g5 first. Okay, then they play knight e7 and f5 is not playable. And f6 becomes a problem, right? So rook g5 isn't a good idea. Okay, so this, well, bishop d3 doesn't help because f6. The rook is trapped, so you have to sacrifice the exchange, which definitely is not enough. Just one pawn is a compensation. Well, bishop d3 first with the idea of doing f5, but this liberates his rook, so he can play this. And after f5, knight e7, rook e5. So no, it doesn't make sense. G6 is vulnerable. So let's say, okay, I just put the rook back, and after a take, this is a check, and then I can defend with knight e7 as well as with rook f6. So let's say king here, rook f6, rook g5, knight e7. So I'm still able to hold the position. No, well, after a g6, it makes sense to play this, and then f5 with king f4, like I suggested. In the game, it was f5, but we know that this move weakens e6. So rook d2, rook f6, rook e2, king d7. Now just a waiting move. G6 was played, bishop b5, creating a pin, rook d6, and king e2. Why this was played? In order to exchange the rooks. Because there was no other way to play for win in this position, Bobby Fischer decided to swap the rooks. King d3, knight e7. Well, let's talk about this position a little. What do you think now? Is white more winning than he was at the very beginning? Or the game can still end in a draw in case if black plays properly? So who can tell me? Well, okay, John, thank you for your suggestion. Yes, I think this is the plan, but it's not so obvious as you wrote. Okay, I'm waiting for more suggestions, and then I will read what John wrote to me. So yeah, there is a good point. So black can always give up his knight for the last pawn, and it's because of that it's not easy to win. That's right. Okay, there is also another comment. That's right, but if, for example, black loses this pawn, it means they lose the all three pawns. So that's why there will be some advantage. So it's not about one pawn. I mean, yeah, losing one pawn isn't critical if there is only one white pawn left. But if there are a lot, then it is a trouble. One extra pawn can create a passed pawn, and if black gives up the knight for that pawn, then white simply gets an extra piece. Okay, so what is interesting in this position is that black pawns on the queen side are on the dark squares. That's right, which provides the bishop with a lot of space. And on the king side, they are on the light square. So the bishop doesn't have much space there, but these pawns are the object of the attack. And that means that the knight has to stay there and the knight is tied down. So if these pawns were located, let's say this, I think the game would end in a draw. But the main task was for black would be to prevent the white king from invasion. So what did happen? Let me show you. Bishop e8, definitely to what Paul and John suggested. Yes, there are Zugzwang ideas too. And the king invades. King's task is to invade the queen side. However, it's not so easy. So bishop checks, of course. Now the king may go to c4, king goes to c6, another check. The king goes to b7, king goes to b5. So everything looks perfect. Now there is a trap, but bishop c6. Well, this trap is actually a checkmate. So if you play a random move, then he will even lose the game. King goes to c7 and bishop d5. So this time, in case of this, the king goes to a6. And there will be Zugzwang ideas. Okay, so let me comment it a little. So first of all, about the pawns located on the dark squares and on the light squares. So what does it mean? So how black should locate their pawns, on light squares or on dark squares? So there is no certain answer in such a position when the knight fights against the bishop. But there are a few things that you should remember dealing with them. Well, it does make sense to restrict the bishops, and it makes sense to locate some of your pawns on the light squares to restrict the bishop. But at the same time, you should understand that, let's say it's, I don't know, the pawn on f7, g6, and h5. It means that you always have to protect the weakness, which is f7 in that case. So if you see that your king is on e6 somewhere, or you see there is another pawn barrier that the enemy king cannot go through, then yes, it does make sense to... It doesn't make sense to... it does make sense to locate some of your pawns on light squares. Otherwise, locate them on the dark squares, but prevent the enemy pieces invasion. Okay, yes, it's just it's the game between Fischer and Taimanov. As for the checkmate, so let's say bishop takes g6, knight d6, attacking this king and covering the c4 square, so he cannot escape. King c7, bishop d5. So, well, this move means king a6, so knight goes to e7 to protect this. The bishop goes back, king goes to b7, and how to win? Looks like we are stuck. In case of bishop e8, it's knight c8 with a mating threat. So what do you think white should do? So I can give you a hint. It's about it's about the invasion, of course. Okay, so there is a good point. Even if the white king goes to a7 and the black king stays on c7, so is it possible to win? Yes, it is possible to win because of Zugzwang ideas, which will shoulder the enemy king away, because the knight always is tied down to the pawn. So just bishop e6 by Paul. Okay, Paul, but what's the purpose? So you play bishop e6. Let's say they play what? King a7. Okay, so no suggestions. This is fine. It's really hard to find this exact idea. Okay, so just wait a sec. Something went wrong with my monitor. Okay, now it's back. And we will
Just make a
continue.
quick comment. White has two waiting moves with c4 and b3, and potentially could play b4.
Yeah, well, before exchanges too many pawns. But okay, so let's say you want to try b3. King a7. c4. King b7. So, and the king is trapped. So now once I play this, knight a7 is a mating threat too. And looks like white is about to lose. So maybe bishop a6 only stops it. But bishop a6, just king a7, this is a draw. So you have to play these moves to avoid checkmate. Okay, so yes, there are two waiting moves, but by locating these two pawns on light squares, you of course trap the king, which is important, but you also stop your bishop from maneuvering. And the key idea was to relocate the bishop to this diagonal. So they played bishop b3. Actually, they could also play bishop c4, but the problem of this move, I mean, of the move bishop c4 could be that the king is now trapped. So, for example, well, it's still fine, I think, because knight c8, bishop d5 check. Yeah, so bishop c4 was playable too, but they played bishop b3. It's much safer. King a7, bishop d1, king b7, bishop f3. Okay, so now what? If he goes there, then which move do you think, guys, we need to play here? We cannot invade the enemy camp. Ah, b3. Okay, so Paul, you are very close. There is no need to push the pawns. We have a bishop. And you know that the bishop can create a triangle. So, for example, you can just spend the tempo with the bishop for nothing. I mean, and then your opponent has to play a move, but they cannot do the same thing with the knight. And the king is tied down to the pawn, it cannot move at all. So knight g8, and then you invade into the enemy camp with king c6. And then you can go to the king side and capture everything. So king goes to c7, king a6, knight c8, bishop d5, knight goes back, bishop c4. So if knight here, then it's bishop here, attacking. Knight goes to c6, which is basically the same. Bishop goes to f7, knight e7, and this move. So what now happens? King d8 was played in the game. Well, the knight cannot move at all. So king d8. Well, the idea was if the bishop goes to f7, it's king c7. And the repetition. So what do you think? Which resource may allow white to win in this case? Because we definitely do not want to repeat the position. Yeah, thanks, guys. You are right. It's bishop takes g6, so there's bishop sacrifice. Knight takes. And king b6. So knight d7. So I think it was not about calculation. It was more about the strategy. So these two pawns will distract the knight while the king can go to the other side. So knight e7, b4, a takes b4, c takes b4. What now? If you decide to go with the king, then let's say after a few moves, the king invades your camp and the knight won't be able to protect the pawns. So that's why Taimanov decides to play this. So I don't think that Bobby really needed to calculate this stuff. I think he just understood it, that the knight is distracted to the pawns and the king can go to that side. And after this king goes, then this king can switch back and go to the queen side to chase the knight away. So a5, which stops knight b6. Knight d6 and b5. Okay, so good question by Peter. Why not to capture the a5 pawn? What was the purpose of this exchange? So taking this pawn consists of several tempi. For example, this, well, they can definitely play knight c6 move too. What else? I think they can enter your territory once you do this. So let's say knight c8, you take, they play knight. No, king c6. Well, I think it was also winning. If you do b4, knight goes to b6. Well, it's not so clear because now these two pieces, the king is trapped on the corner, and these two pieces, the king and the knight, are able to hold these 3 pawns. But with b3, like a kind of a waiting move. So if he does this, you play c4, or actually, wait, if he does this, you play this move and then a5. If he decides to capture the pawns of the other flank, I think you are faster. b5, king c7, or king b7, c4, knight g3, c5, king c7. This is what you need to calculate. It may be 92 instead. c6. So b6, this, and yes, white is winning. Let's say if the king doesn't take, it's a winning position. So it's basically the same. Right, so it was possible to capture that pawn too. But then a lot of calculation would be required. Here, 2 pawns are enough to distract the knight. So they played knight e4 to capture on g3, but after king b6, black realized that it's too late because this, and it's over. So there is no way for the king to for the knight to stop the a pawn. So king c8 was played, king c6 now, because there are several things threatening. For example, in knight g3 case, it's this threatening with a7, after which the pawn is promoted without any problems. So king b8, but then it's this, knight goes back, a7, king e8, and with b7, king a7, king goes there, we are able to win the game because this is a check. Even if it wasn't a check, and let's say somehow it's possible to play this, well, but then take. Well, if the knight is lost, white is winning because white is closer to this pawn. If knight is not, then black can hold and make a draw. Well, but it's definitely losing. Queen b8, b8 equals queen is promoted with the check. So king goes to b8, and after b6, they simply resign because nothing can stop this idea. So, okay, so for those who want to join the next webinar by entering a Zoom meeting, I want you to register. So guys, you all register it here. So I'm just answering for those who is watching the webinar on YouTube. So this is the link. So there will be a new announcement on Wednesday. Please register then. Okay, fine. So let's move on and continue with the next example. So here the bishop was better than a knight in the open position. So the position was relatively open. And the key idea was to enter the enemy side, the enemy camp with this. As well as to attack these pawns with the bishop. Okay, we have one more example to work on. The game between Anatoly Karpov against Gyula Saks. So white to move, what would you do? Both players have bishops, bishop pair. Well, here white is a pawn down, but I don't think it matters. Both e4 and e5 pawns are weak. Any suggestions? Okay, g5, interesting. Well, definitely a move that deserves attention, but what's the purpose? Well, they may take, you take, and then you're threatening with doing g6, well, which weakens the light squares. So yes, this is a helpful move. I don't think that it's the best option, but anyway. a3, because bishop a4 is coming. Right, actually. So g5, bishop a4 will be played. And you can take on b7, so it's not a big issue. No, the queen is not trapped. Okay, bishop d5 by Brian. Well, Brian, yes, this is what I would play if there was no better move. But there is. And this move is actually rook d5. So, well, in the very beginning of the webinar, I told you that the bishop can be stronger than a rook. And this is the exact case because the whole position of black is held by this bishop on c6. And well, if they do not take, we take on e5. For example, if they do this move, we can exchange this bishop and still take on e5 later, or we can, well, this is an option. This is probably an option, and bishop a7, let's say. So we are happy if they take, because then the king is in the trouble. Their king is in the trouble. This is exactly what happens. So bishop d5, bishop takes bishop, rook d8. Looks like they are attacking. The bishop goes back with the idea of doing this. So a6 doesn't work because of bishop b6, and the queen is trapped. Well, almost trapped. Let's say a6. We would play a6, just queen b7 works because we can liquidate this pawn later. So bishop b4 was done. c3, chasing this bishop away, and b5. That was the idea. However, we want to keep this bishop alive. And, well, bishop d5 deserves attention, I agree, but bishop e2 was played. So these two moves have different ideas, but the key idea is to check the king using this diagonal. If the bishop goes to d5, then bishop c6 is the goal. And if the bishop goes here, then bishop takes b5. And I think with bishop e2, it's easier because this bishop has to move. Now you can take, but king goes to e7. Oh, let me show you. King goes to e7, and it's not clear how you continue. So that's why this move first. The king goes to e7 in advance. Now, again, guys, your turn. You are down the exchange. There is no pawns to compensate it. However, there is the enemy king on e7, and this rook doesn't participate in the game yet. So you suggest playing g5. Well, they can take and play f6 after that with a temper. So any suggestions instead? So John is correct. So it's bishop c5. Now the whole position is held by this bishop. So yeah, that's why once we liquidate it, the game is over. For example, f6, right? We're saving by the first glance. But then bishop goes here. Actually, with g5, it was also possible to play this move. And they cannot take because of this idea. So bishop c4, well, maybe rook d7, but then this move first to increase the pressure on the pin, and then the queen invades the enemy camp, and it's over. Let's say queen takes c4. And you may continue with bishop e7 and take here, after which the game ends in a draw. Oh, yeah, the game ends in the white's favor. Okay, so f6 is not playable. Yes, Peter. So in the original position, king b1 or a3 is too slow. So, well, because e5 is also hanging, they have to deal with it. They decided to take, which was right, I think, but still not enough. Intermediate check, and then we take. So white is still down the exchange. No pawns to compensate it. Queen c7, trying to exchange. Otherwise, that would lead to a checkmate. Queen c7, queen f5, not to let him escape to c8. King e7 and take the next pawn. King goes back. It's a repetition. We captured one more pawn, which now means that we can bring the rook. Rook goes to d6. Yeah, rook e1. So rook goes to d6. And now bishop c4, which stops rook e6 move. So king goes there and bishop takes b5. So now we have one pawn, but what is more important, we have a strong attack. a6, well, just bishop b4. So it's important to keep the bishop on this diagonal to always threaten with opera mate if this rook goes somewhere. g6, queen f3. So now we can enter through the enemy territory, and they play king c8. What would you do then in this position? Who can tell me? Because the key idea is that once you do this, they go to b8 with the queen. And a6 is protected. So after you play queen e8 and queen b8, I don't see how to continue the attack, unfortunately. Can we play queen e5? When? Instead of doing queen f3? Yes, we can, but what's the purpose? Or in this position, you want to play what? Queen a8 and then queen e4 back, but again, what's the purpose? Okay, so guys, I'm waiting for other suggestions. Yes, so you're right. It's rook e7. So can you please send it as a direct message next time, okay? So rook e7, absolutely right. And if the queen takes, it's queen e8. So he has only one square to move to, and then it's queen e7 and he loses the queen. So in case of king c8, he loses the queen, and then it's definitely a winning position with queen and bishop versus two rooks. If king d8, it's a checkmate. So that's why they cannot take it. They have to play what? It's hard to suggest anything because this is a mate on the next move. So let's say this, probably, then just what? G here to play this move. Yeah, and then rook d7. So the game continued with this, rook d1, to distract either the king or the queen or the bishop. So king takes. Now this is not a checkmate because the king escapes to d6. But it's still a checkmate. Queen b6, and this is where black resigned. Why? Because after king e5, queen d4, king e6, and bishop b3 mate. So this is how the game ended. Well, what can we say? So the bishop can be stronger than the rook in case if the bishop participates in something really important. In this case, it was an attack. And the key idea was that it's not possible to cover the squares that this bishop is attacking. I mean, it was possible to cover some of them, but not all of them. And with the coordination of three pieces, the bishop became more valuable than a rook, especially such a rook that is on f8. If that rook was, let's say, somewhere here or here, then black was able to stop to hold the position. But with the passive piece, it wasn't enough. Okay, fine. So what we're gonna do then? Let's continue. So first of all, for those who want to support our webinars, you can donate using this link. So it's really easy. You click donate, then you enter the amount you want to donate, and then you click this button, and it automatically redirects you to PayPal. You enter your account and transfer the money directly to my account. So I really appreciate those who already donated. Well, it helps me to plan my webinars and prepare better content. So I'll send you the link here in the chat. Okay, now let's continue. What we're gonna do right away? Right away, we're gonna play the game. From which position? Yeah, good point. I think I'll give you some attacking chances. So you are going to play from this position. That was a game fragment. Garry Kasparov was playing against Alexander Grishchuk, and he had a bishop pair and one extra pawns. And well, of course, this pawn is hanging, but somehow Gary initiated the attack on the Grishchuk's king, and I want you to almost repeat the same thing. So let me know those who want to play. So it's gonna be 15 plus 10. Okay. Okay, just a sec. Okay. So 15 plus 10 custom. Here 15 plus 10, then fin, then I enter this, I play with black pieces, and let it be Peter. Who else wants? Okay, fine. The challenge is sent to Peter. Parallax. Yeah, once Peter accepts it, we're gonna play the game. Okay, so Peter, message me once you're ready. Okay. So yeah, let's make a few moves and then I'll challenge Parallax. So I'm going to defend this position somehow.
Can I think about it for a little bit or like
No, it gives you about 40 seconds, I think. Why doesn't it?
Oh my God.
No. Okay, bishop b3. Okay, fine. But no, it's not fine. I just take the knight, the bishop then. So, okay, please think, and then let's play once again, okay? Because I don't want you to end without the bishop. So for some reason it doesn't work for me. What's going on? Let me check. Maybe I need to refresh the page. Okay, so custom from a position 15 plus 10, then fin, then this, then I play with black, and then I select their opponent. Okay, perfect. Play. Yes, okay. Yeah, I just need to start a few games and make a few moves, and then I will let other people join it. So the bishop on e5 is hanging. Okay, interesting. Looks like I don't have much choice here, right? So I have to take. And then king h6. But a4 is still vulnerable. Okay, let me start a new game. So custom. I don't know why it's not possible to challenge Alex. No. Let me type Peter. No, it doesn't work at all. Okay. I'll get back to you guys. Bishop g7, king h5. Let me refresh the page one more time. So new game, custom. So Alex, I don't know why I cannot enter your username here and it doesn't show you. Now it doesn't show any username. Okay, no. Hmm. Okay, I'll get back to you guys. Just a sec. Let me try to do this. Okay, so Peter. I think that John wants to checkmate my king. I don't see how, but I think so. Okay, so let me make a few moves with Peter. So Alex, please let me know if this link works for you or not. King G2, so I can take here. Then King G3, I probably expect. Well, let me take anyway. Peter, you have to make the move. Otherwise, the game will be aborted. Just retreat with the bishop. Okay, fine. But then I take here. King G3, so exactly what I expected. So what now? Well, this fails, right? Bishop F5, Rook D6. So what can I do? Wait, just a sec, guys. There is something wrong with my monitor. Just a second. Yeah, now it works. Okay, so G4 doesn't work, so I can do this, which doesn't make much sense. Well, actually it does, but then it's this move. Okay, this is what I've already took a look at. So B5. Oh, okay. Oh, I have to make a move now. Okay, let me play maybe this move. So King G3. Well, Bishop F5. No, this no. Well, King G3 was very good actually. Okay, let me play Rook C4. I don't know what for, but let's do it. Because I don't see a winning plan for white anymore. Hmm. Okay. You are not accepting challenges. Okay, that's why I cannot challenge you. No, well, it shouldn't be 3 minutes. It should be 15 plus 10. With 3 minutes, I lose. Okay, bishop c4. Okay, what's the purpose of this move? Are you challenging me from which position? From the standard position? No, it doesn't make sense. Okay, I can send you a challenge once again, but it's probably something with your settings. Okay, so this is a fork. What I have this and I have this. So let it be this move. Well, the point is to play this move, which is quite clever. Well, what can I do? I can play bishop somewhere to let the king escape. Okay, fine. Yes, your turn. Let me quickly play in the other game. So here, okay, let me do this move. So you need to play the move within 40 seconds, remember. Bishop e6. Well, okay, fine, but it leads to a mass exchange. Ah, this is a problem now, okay. Let me take this. So I don't want to lose on g5, so probably just this move. Okay, looks like we have to draw the game. Rook h6 is now coming, so I have to repeat. Okay, this move, threatening to take with a check. King f5, rook b6. Oh, okay, got it. So now rook b5 check is very unpleasant. I want to play g4, but I cannot. Okay. I think it's a draw once I take with my rook. So what's the winning plan? Oh, well, this is a draw. Yeah, right. Well, John has real chances to play for a win, but I don't know how yet. But so rook d5 is always a check. So okay, let me play rook a5. Oops. Oh yeah, it's just a loss. Okay, it was a draw, but I somehow managed to lose it. So I have to take. Now let me come closer to the pawn and take it. So where to move the king? Okay, let me move it to c4. Right. So this is a threat again. So let me try to draw this game. I'm not sure if I can, but I'll try. Oops, the king cannot go to the 5th rank. Okay. King c3. So what's the goal? Bishop d2, rook d5. I can try this. Okay. So, right, this move, but oh, I know. I know what I can do. I can play rook d3 and draw the game. So exchanging pieces wasn't a good idea, guys, in this strategy. So, John, I think this is a draw because the rook exchange is forced. And once we are done with it, I don't think you have any chances. So, yeah, fine. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to our game example, and I will show you how these two bishops are dangerous when it comes to an attack on the king. So, yeah, take a look on the board. What did bishop c3, of course, to retreat? So it was knight c5 played. So why not rook takes a4? Good point. But if rook takes a4, you can do this, creating a pin. And the key idea is that you cannot attack because then bishop d7, and once you take, it's a check. And if you don't take, then you lose another bishop. So that's why what? Rook a7, but rook d5. And after, let's say, bishop here, you can take on g5 and get another pawn and expose the king. The bishop e6, you do the same thing. Okay, so the game continued with knight c5. And then a very nice idea, h4. Not to exchange the pawn, but just get rid of this pawn. So g takes h4 and a5. What is the idea of a5? Well, so to make the knight the object of the attack. So b takes a5, rook d5, double attack. Of course, they save. They save the knight with this position. But after bishop d4, look at this knight on the edge. So a5 was a very nice tactical idea, so which undermines the pawn on b6 and makes this fork. It seems that the only way to not lose one of these pieces is to make a move with the knight and gain a temper, which was this. Because if, for example, you play this move, it's simply a rook h5 with a checkmate. So this is the only way. And then bishop d4, so totally restricting this knight on the edge. Bishop g6. We do not exchange the bishops because our task when the king is almost trapped in the corner is to use both bishops and the rook. So bishop c2, f4. Why? The f4 pawn will participate in the game supporting the rook on g5. So rook b8, rook h5 check, king goes to g6, check on g5 now, king goes to h6, and this threatening with a checkmate rook h5. So that's why bishop d1. What now? What would you play? So it seems that something like bishop f6 is required. Well, Gary played king h2, the move which didn't make any sense, actually. I don't know, maybe he just didn't know how exactly to play and wanted to take time and think while his opponent is thinking. So rook goes there, and then he does this. Rook goes back, and bishop e6 is the idea of doing this stuff. Rook c6, bishop g7, king goes there, bishop f5, king goes to g8, and well, we can move the bishop, but there is nothing to attack with this bishop. What would you play then?
Why not bishop to c3? To win the
You
pawn.
want to capture a useless pawn? Well, yes, you can, but I think you can capture it even if you just simply play bishop e4, like it was played in the game. Yeah, bishop d4 makes sense, but bishop e5 makes even more sense. Rook c5, check, king goes there, and then bishop d4, attacking the rook. And there is a mating threat of this and this. So if the rook, let's say, goes somewhere, check, king goes there, checkmate. So that's why the rook has to retreat with a check. King h3, rook goes back to c7 to stop this idea. At least the rook covers the g7 square, but it's not enough. And after this, well, this move is not possible, but how to continue? Who can tell me? To threaten the checkmate. Oh, king h4. How king h4 makes checkmate closer? Anything else? Rook g6. King h4 and rook g6 with a checkmate. Okay, king h4. Well, yes, king h4 works, so they have to give up a bishop, I think. Or maybe they have... Yeah, that works. So the idea is that now king h7 is playable because, well, but you can take the rook at least, so it's winning. And you can just take on f3 first in this position. Right, king h4 works. It works, but rook g8 was played instead, which works too, because this is a checkmate. And doing this stuff doesn't work because then this is a checkmate. These pieces are completely useless. Well, this is not a checkmate. The king goes there, but then bishop g6. This is how a checkmate is delivered. So actually, after rook g8, Grishchuk resigned. So let's take a look at this fragment once again. So bishop c3, knight c5, h4, getting rid of this, and a5. So very nice. And then rook d5, forking. After which, in order to save pieces, knight a4 has to be played, which allows us to trap the knight and continue doing the attack with f4 and rook to g5. Fine, we are almost done for today, so let me show you the homework. No, it's not. this is the homework. So for the homework, I give you these two positions where first, in the first one, the task is to find a winning plan for black. Black is almost winning, and mainly because they have a dark squared bishop. And the second one is a bit more complicated. So here you have to make a move to get a decisive advantage and then illustrate how you take advantage of this decisive advantage. So how do you finish the game in your favor? Okay, fine. If you have any suggestions regarding the topic for the next webinar, you can message me. Also, once again, if you want to support my webinars, there is a link for you, so you can use it to send a donation directly to my PayPal account. I can copy the link here once again. So for those who wants to play against me, so guys, yes, you can play, but on the next webinar and in the form of a simul. So this is how you can donate, just clicking on the button and then clicking the PayPal and entering your PayPal account. Okay, so this is my profile. I'll copy it. So those of you who are not, well, you can send me a friend request. It makes our communication easier. Also, there is a group where I publish announcements. It's just Lance. So it's here, for example, take advantage of your bishop. There was an announcement here. And we are actually looking for a volunteer for this group to play this, to play the tournaments. Maybe do some moderation if needed. Okay. Oh, and one more thing, my email for you, if you want to suggest any topics for future webinars, if you have any questions regarding private lessons or just any suggestions. You can send a letter at tricksofchess@gmail.com. So I have some ideas regarding the topic of the next webinar. So maybe the webinar after that, I'll definitely appreciate your suggestions. So there is a webinar about two rooks versus queen. So there I illustrate that the rooks are better than the queen when it comes to passed pawns, stopping the passed pawns or promoting pawns, but the queen is better than two rooks when the enemy king is exposed. Okay, thank you for joining the event today. I hope to see everyone next Sunday. If there are no questions, we will finish for today. Okay, fine. So see you guys. Bye-bye.